Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome along to the Crash MotoGP podcast. On the show today, we've got some more 2023 livery reveals. It's all very exciting, but testing back again this weekend. Finally, bikes back on track, and Keith has got some things to say later on. We've also got your questions to answer too. So remember, if you want to send us a question, you can voice note us, do it on your phone, or you can email us at podcast@crash.net along with your name and where you're from. Keep it to around 30 seconds and we'll get you on the show. You can also just sort of write your question as well if you don't want your voice played out. Okay, the recording date is Wednesday, the 8th of March. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me as always is Crash's MotoGP editor, Pete McLaren, and former MotoGP rider and Grand Prix winner, Keith Hewen. Winner.
I'd love to be a Grand Prix winner, Harry. You've elevated me.
I can't believe I've done that same.
I'm surprised you corrected me.
It's a dream come true. And then I woke up.
Just gonna let that roll, Keith. That's fine. Yeah.
I've done that same intro for 79.
You carry on, Harry. I'm happy with that.
And world champion rider Keith Hewen on the show. I can't believe how have I messed that up after 79 goes at that. It's
brilliant. That'll be on the outtakes.
That'll be on Keith's answer phone.
Yeah, it's Keith Hewen. You know who he is. Right, we'll come to Keith in a minute. He's at his glory. Pete, come on then. Let's see off these livery reveals. LCR, weird seeing Rins in some different colours from the Suzuki. Nakagami is well revealed, and VR46 plus Gas. So it really is ramping up now ahead of the test this weekend.
That's right, Harry. Yeah, and you call it right by livery reveal. That's really all that we've said it before goes on with these launches these days. It's just what the bikes are going to look like. You can't really judge anything from, some people look at them and go, oh, they've got that part the same, that part different, but it's just really to show the colours and it's something for the sponsors, isn't it? As you say, Rins, Suzuki rider for his whole career in MotoGP until now, so a bit of a change for him, taking on the bike that Cal Crutchlow won races with. That was the last time that LCR took victories was with Cal back 2018, I think was his last one, wasn't it? Rins takes over there from Alex Marquez. Nakagami, on the other hand, I think it's his sixth year. He's on the Idemitsu-backed bike. So, yeah, very familiar livery for him on that side of the garage. But, he's got to sort of reverse his fortunes, isn't he? He had sort of his first 3 years in MotoGP, he was on the up. And then the last 2 years, he's sort of gone down again. So it's a big year for him. We know pressure from Mayagura last year. So, he's got to deliver this year if he wants to keep hold of that race seat at least. Over at Gas, as you say, I guess that's the biggest news, isn't it? It's whether you call it a new manufacturer or not, isn't it, is the thing. It's new branding, but the bike is of course a KTM. And for people that might say, well, what's the difference here? If it was let's say a completely new manufacturer or a full new manufacturer in terms of the rules, they'd have technical concessions. They don't, because it is a KTM and it's branded as a gas. So that's really the distinction. But it does mean there's going to be 2 more red bikes on the grid, not just the factory Ducatis. It's a very similar red, very clean looking. You might say, well, that's because there's not too many other sponsors on there. But certainly a clean, distinctive look for Pol, who's back with Tectoir. He began his MotoGP career with and back with KTM under another name. Quite funny at the Sepang test, he was being picked up. He didn't quite know what to call, whether to call them KTMs or anything else. And in the end, it was Pira Mobility Group is apparently what he should call the collection of KTMs and gas bikes. So doesn't quite slip off the tongue as easy as KTM, but there we are. And then VR46, a bit like LCR, really minor tweaking to the livery. It's got more black on it, basically. The riders, both of them like black bikes. But as always, the fastest bike looks the best, doesn't it, really?
I don't think they're very bold, are they? And they're it's very corporate nowadays. I mean, again, I hasten to say this and almost hate myself for it because it does show my age. But I did love big, bold numbers. Helmets that didn't change that much. We seem to have got into that modern day situation where, well, it's easier from a commentary point of view as well. I mean, there are a lot of people that tune in to MotoGP, to anything. I've been watching a lot of telly this weekend. We'll get there in a minute. And when you are listening to commentators, they're not mentioning numbers. They almost expect you to know who they are that they're talking about. And when you've got a wide shot of 6-10 bikes, that's the other thing with bike racing, of course, you've got a lot of bikes in shot. So you want to know what number's who, what colour who's who, and things change in the way they do. So I think that it's not really encouraging newer viewers to really understand what's going on out on the track, on television. It's fine for all of us because we know everybody just by their shadow. But it's kind of for people that are new to the sport, and bearing in mind we want to engage with as many people as we can, big, bold numbers and commentators that give you a bit more information. I mean, I always used to remember a fellow called Martin Turner, who was a fantastic BAFTA-winning producer. We all know him. And Martin Turner used to say, numbers, colours. He'd be shouting in my ear hole all the way through it. And, well, I know who they are. Why don't everyone else? No, that's not the attitude. The point is we're trying to engage new viewers and to get them to understand who's who and who's making the passes, when sometimes it's a bit of a blur when you're watching it on TV. Again, bike racing, blimey, you can have 10 changes of position in one lap easily. That's its Moto 3, and you can triple it.
Oh, yeah, literally. I had to do a British GT round last year. Never done it before. Dropped into the finale. And the producer loved me, though, because I was doing all of that. But the only reason I was doing it is because I didn't have any idea who they were. So I had to do it for myself. And I went, that's him. He's number 7 in the purple, white, and brown BMW, and then just hoping.
But who watches GT3? At the end of the day, if I'd turned that on and you hadn't been commentating, I would have watched it if it had been good racing, because I'm a petrol head at the end of the day. But not understanding who was out there and what car they was in would have been bloody annoying, to be frank with you. And so I wonder how much of a missed opportunity for something very simple like a producer. Bearing in mind, I was quite lucky again back in the day. I had Martin Turner and one or two others who were brilliant producers who wouldn't let you get away with making those kind of faux pas, really. I think it goes down, and we're getting close to the rant that I want to have in a minute about television. It goes down to the fact that production is not what it used to be in TV. There aren't the numbers of people behind the scenes now that are really banging the drum to make it better. Dorna do a great job, but then it gets farmed out, obviously, to other production companies to put that out in their particular regions for broadcasters in those places. But there you go. On livery, I think big numbers and a bit more effort by commentators.
Well, go on. We're there. We may as well. Keith.
Well, okay. I mean, how many people have watched the World Superbikes at the weekend from Indonesia? I mean, if you didn't, then shame on you, because it's around the World Superbikes. We're expecting great things from World Superbikes this year. I was so disappointed with the television coverage. And it got me thinking about, why is this happening? What's happening here? I know that everybody's working for half price now. I mean, quite amusingly, Talent Pete and myself are considered in the industry to be called Talent.
I think you called me Talent there.
In my case, they missed out less on the end. Yeah,
I think you just said Talent Pete and myself, and not my name.
Well, there you go.
I only respond to Talent.
That just proves the point. That just proves the point. I've got no talent. But anyway, the presenters and the commentators and the people the front of house, if you like, of a broadcast are considered to be talent. They're all on a bit less money now because the cost of talent is coming down. But the cost of other things are all going up: transportation, hotels, all that kind of stuff as well. So television companies, production companies are all looking to try and dumb it down a little bit, if you like. And it'll be interesting to see where BT go now that they've obviously been taken over as well by the conglomerate that is Liberty Media. And it just, at the weekend, we were missing Charlie Iscott. Wasn't there in Parc Fermé on the grid. Man, I missed that bloke so much in this week. I mean, Charlie, I know Charlie quite well, and he can be an aggravating, horrible little sod. But the fact of the matter is he's very good at what he does, and he gets the best out of the riders. No disrespect to the guy that had obviously been thrown in at Parc Fermé, an Englishman, I don't even know who it was, but he was asking the good old standard questions, and we all just went, oh, for God's sake, why don't we have Charlie back? And we miss him. I think that television companies are beginning to shortchange us a little bit. It's costing us much more money to have this stuff now on subscription. We've got, I mentioned Liberty Media. Liberty Media, the owners of Formula One and just about everybody else now, Discovery, Eurosport, North One, who are part of the All 3 Media, which is 40 companies. All 3 Media is massive. And North One, who produced the BT Sport coverage of MotoGP, is just a small cog in the wheel. All these companies' budgets are shrinking, and they're looking to reel back on people. At the same time, they're coming under pressure for the diversification thing, where they've got to have certain females, certain this, that, and the other in place to suit the modern day ethics, if you like. But all the time, we seem to be getting a little bit less than we had. Now, it remains to be seen. BT Sport, I know that Susie Perry isn't going out to some of the rounds this coming year. There'll be a cost factor to that. There'll be a travel factor to that. We've got more races than we've ever had. We just had Amy Dargan, now Reynolds. She got married, I think, 3 years ago. Had a baby last year. Now, you'll know Amy, long blonde hair, very petite girl, very good at what she does. She works for Dorna. Somehow, she's been edged out of the equation there as well. I mean, she's just had a baby, as I say, so 21 rounds. She wanted to do a little less this year, but there's been no dispensation, it seems, made for her as a new mother, which is completely wrong. I don't know the ins and outs of it, and I don't want to get into it politically, but obviously there's a situation there that probably shouldn't have been a situation there, and they haven't been able to negotiate their way around it. So we're going to be missing Amy as well during the course of the year. It just strikes me at the moment that we're getting less for television. I don't know about you, but I've just had my Virgin Media bill is just about to go up by £49. That is not a small amount a month for no extra. Yeah, okay, I might have been getting it. I've negotiated it to be fairly cheap in the first place, but the fact is that it's about to go up by nearly 50 quid in one hit. I'm assuming that that's across the board. Everybody is going to be getting big hits regarding their sports coverage and the like. TNT is now the overriding BT Sport, Eurosport, and American Sport umbrella. TNT, your Eurosport will go, BT Sport will go as titles. It will be called TNT in the future. It ain't going to get no cheaper. You can be fairly sure of that. The only good thing is that maybe a TNT package will bring in BT Sport and Eurosport under one revenue stream, perhaps. But it ain't going to be cheaper. There's no way it's going to be cheaper. So I'm just wondering, and this is where the Crash, viewers and listeners can help us out a bit here. I mean, how do you view it? How do you view your television package? Has it got better or has it got worse over the years? BT Sport, I think, has been consistently good. I'm not bringing them into it, but I think it'll be interesting to see how this year goes with the fact that some of the commentators, some of the presenters won't be travelling to the track. And that, for me, I've always thought that you need to be on site. You need to be getting that first-hand information from trackside. Pete's there all the time bringing it for Crash. All these guys. Actually, thinking about that, that's another thread that we can go down, Pete. Dorna have finally recognised digital media. They've actually finally, bearing in mind this is an old bugbear that you will have heard quite often, the likes of David Emmett, if you go into motormatters.com and listen to or read his rant about this as well. Pete has struggled over the years because he is digital media. Digital media has always been really considered to be a lower class citizen in the journalistic world, and we know that's not to be true because of the likes of Pete, who bring us brilliant stuff, and you can trust what he says. There's more smoke blown up before Pete, all right. But it's the truth. It is the truth. I'm not just saying it because you sat in front of us. The fact is, there are some journalists that you can trust with what they say. There are others, and I won't mention the name,
but we all know,
particularly who's all opinion, and it can't be trusted. It's something that you kind of look at it and you think, well, I better go and check with some other journo to see whether that is right. And 9 times out of 10, it turns out to be not right. There are journalists that repeat press releases, which kind of negates their worth or their useless, they're a waste of air if that's all they do. So the proper journos, even the digital media one, should be valued. And at last, it seems that Dorna are going to look after you guys, which hooray. Where would you like to pick up on, Harry, on any of that rant? Just ask me a question.
I don't know. I wonder. Obviously, we come at it from a MotoGP and a motorsport broadcasting scenario, but I wonder if this is all just part of a wider issue. We're seeing prices go up left, right, and centre for absolutely everything, not just television costs, but even entertainment. You look at stuff like Netflix and things like this, and they're going to stop you being able to share profiles. So they're going to make sure you all have to pay individually, even if I'm a big family, so we all share one, which means I don't have to pay out the Netflix, but I will have to because they're going to stop that kind of thing. So it adds up into the costs on TV bills and things like that, left, right, and centre, let alone being just a sport factor too.
I never find enough on Netflix. I've got Netflix and Prime as part of that ludicrously expensive package that's going up 50 quid. But it's kind of like I never really find enough on it to justify the money. It's only because there's 5 of us in this house and everybody views off the back of that, and they seem to really, really want it. I mean, are we comparing television production to the price of eggs or something? In that if you get 6 eggs in a box and it's gone up by 50p, then you're getting the same eggs. But I'm wondering whether we're going into this Poundland type situation where you go in there and you want to buy your litre of cooking oil or whatever, and suddenly you're the same money, but it's gone down to 750 mil or something, and you're getting less for the same cash. Is that where we're going with broadcasting, do you think? We're going to get we're going to pay something like the same or a bit more, but we're going to get less for it, the Charlie Iscotts of this world, which I think, are we going to skim through all the presentation and just start the viewing at the race and at the checkered flag because there's nothing interesting either side of it? They're not bringing us any information. And that's what I got from World Superbikes at the weekend. I got no information either side of the racing. Make up your mind what you got. You got JT and Greg Haynes giving us a commentary. And even then, what it did was it put more strain on them to get information out in the broadcast. And I didn't enjoy that as much. I felt like there was too many stats in it then, which normally that kind of gossip and innuendo and all the rest of it is down to the presenters to present either side of the racing. I want to see the racing. I want to hear the comments about the racing. I want JT to be giving me his view as a double world champion and his skill regarding that. Not a whole load of stats and bits and pieces that he's kind of got on his piece of paper and he wants to get out there. That's for presentation. That's for either side of it, in my view. And I want to know what people on Crash think. I want to know how they view commentary, presentation, cost, whether they're getting as much as they thought they should be getting for the money they're paying now. Or has that decreased?
So to pick up on another point you said as well about remote broadcasting and things like that. So I work for FOM, as you guys know, Formula One Management, owned by Liberty Media too. And that has become, since COVID, increasingly entirely remote, pretty much. They said a skeleton crew out to most of the races. There are some presenters that go out. There's obviously camera operators, technicians, things like that. But the entire gallery is based back in the UK. Most of the commentary is based back in the UK. And there are upsides to that as well as saving costs. Obviously, it means for the likes of maybe the older geezers who don't want to travel as much, being away from their family and all this kind of things, it helps them out too. Having done a lot of my commentaries remote, people don't actually realize that you are remote. It's always a bit of a, taking the veil off and revealing, oh, sorry, we're not actually in Bahrain. And that's a downside for me personally. But on another upside is, because they're now focusing more remote, this is particularly from a Formula One perspective, they've just built these amazing new studios, all London-based, and they're actually ramping up their production around the race weekends and particularly midweek, because now they can do it all remotely. They can do it all in one place. They can actually spend more time trying to get more programming up and about and actually increase their offering. So I wonder if this is actually more of maybe a motorbike, World Superbike specific issue with how they're doing the production at the moment.
It's money at the end of the day. Formula One is the sport when it comes to generating cash, and that's what it will come down to, absolutely. And you've got the environmental thing as well. I mean, you'll have all seen it at the end of a program. It said, this is an Albert sustainable production. Now, how the old Albert came in.
I was about to say Albert Bartlett, but that's a roast potato brand, isn't it?
Well, I was thinking of Prince Albert, and we're going in a completely different direction. But the point being, don't gulp. The point being is that there is an environmental side to this where air miles and the like, and I'm serious about it because we do have to do something about that, obviously. Environmentally, it's correct. But the Albert Award is a sustainable production. But I kind of went to the presentation at BT Sport, which it's one of them voluntary but not voluntary kind of attendance things that you do at these corporate type big wigs that they get you to go to. And we had this presentation going on, and so if I drank out of a stainless steel BT goblet and a stainless steel straw, it's considered to be offset to my air miles that it cost me to get there. They've got this kind of calculation of if you promote environmentally friendly things during your broadcast, it's considered to be offset. Just total bullshit. Honestly, I've never known anything quite like it, to be frank with you. I mean, there was, at that particular point, there were 26 people from BT travelling to each and every MotoGP. Since then, there's a lot more gone remote, as you say, Harry, a lot more back in the technology has caught up so that they can do things remotely. But there is no, and by the way, drinking out of a stainless steel cup was because there was masses in the corner of the Dorna camp. There would be like 3,000 bottles of water, plastic bottles of water that was discarded during the course of the weekend, and to do with a whole load of other things, plastics all over the place. And plastic is a nasty thing. So I can understand the thinking behind it. But we're a motorsport, churning out carbon everywhere we go and everything we do, which is gradually being reduced. But whether it's a sustainable production or not, I think is almost like a statistical juggling act that you have with the things that you're trying to do within it. Getting back to the people on site side of things, there's no compromise there. Surely, you need presenters and commentators on site at a race meeting. The information lost, you might get away with it once or twice during the course of a year because of some other force majeure or whatever it might be that means that you can't get to a track because of COVID or whatever that is. But the point being is that information that you get when you're stood in the car park, when everybody drives up at 6:30 in the morning and you walk in with Valentino Rossi's mechanics, with whoever it might be back in the day, and you're picking up information, leaning against a fence while mechanics are having a fag before they start work in the morning, or running around the track. Not that I ever ran around the track, I walked around the track, but I'd get them while they'd done 2 laps. I'd get the same mechanics or whatever and have a bit of a chat with them around there. It's invaluable from the value that you get as a journalist, as a commentator, as a broadcast entity, from being there and talking with these people face to face. That is what we pay quite large amounts of money for to watch. That is what we pay a subscription for. If all you're going to get is a world feed, it's like a press release. I mean, I get 1,000 press releases on my computer, and I pretty much delete most of them from the start. I don't even bother reading them because there's nothing in them that's of any interest. It's just wallpaper. It's like paint jobs, like Pete's just been saying about the bikes. We're interested in what's under the cover more than what's painted on them. And I think that if television is going the way of press releases, where we're only going to get that homogenized, low-level interest stuff, I don't like that at all. And again, if you're comparing it with Formula One, like you just were a minute ago, can you not watch bloody Sky Formula One? I have to watch it. I have to watch it because there's stuff in it. Bloody Ted Kravitz. If he was in my lounge, I'd throw him out. But I tell you what, for his stuff is just, you've got to watch it. You've got to hear it. And I value that stuff. And I think if I'm going to pay the 150 quid a month or whatever it is for all my bloody channels in HD and Ultra HD and all the rest of it, I want that kind of information. I don't want it to be done. I don't want to lose the likes of Charlie Hiscock.
Well, it's a fascinating topic, isn't it? Let us know. We do want to hear what you think on that in the comments below, or you can get in touch on the social channels. Just while we're we talked a lot about the broadcast side, obviously, and we are going to come back to some actual on-track stuff in a minute. But Pete, I think it might be interesting for people just to hear what it's like for you as a digital journalist. How does it work for you in terms of getting to tracks? How many can you actually go to? What freedoms you have and what you can't do?
Well, as Keith was saying, from this year, digital and print, if you like, will be the same. So it's it depends if you're asking before or after this year. But so for this year, everyone will be, let's say, treated the same way, run by the same press office, if you like. So it will simplify things immensely. And then, as a I suppose written journalist is probably the easiest way of putting it. Because if I say print, obviously, who prints things these days? Not many people, right? So you get... What's the access? I suppose the minimum access that you might get is only for the paddock and the media room. Not many people would be, but that's the minimum level, if you like. Then you get access to the service road around the track, so you can walk and stand around the track as well as the paddock, the media room. And then if you like, there's the pit lane part, which is much more heavily restricted these days. And I rarely get to go into pit lane apart from tests. And that's fair enough. I mean, the numbers have to be restricted in pit lane. They prioritize the TVs for that. And there's a safety issue there with having too many people. So that's sort of how it works for the track access. And then you've got a choice, really. You can either, pass-wise, you either go for single event passes. I guess this is the same as any motorsport. Or you apply for a season pass, which means, obviously, you can just have one pass at the start of the year and you get to go to all the races. But, that's sort of how it works from the written side of things. The number of journalists, it varies massively depending on where you are. Obviously, as a kind of a European sport, it's almost like two different championships in some ways. When it's in Europe, when it's in Europe, you've got all the hospitality, and Keith will know, it's all the hospitality units and loads of journalists from, say, Spain and Italy and the continent, if you like, that can very easily drive between races. And then you go to all these, let's say, the flyaways now, which are pretty much half of the season outside Europe. That's where it's going. And some races you can go to, and there'll be just a handful of journalists there from the international side because of the costs. So again, coming back to what you guys were saying about the costs going up, flight prices have increased massively since COVID, and that's eating into everybody's travel expenses and everything else. Having to be a lot more careful about which events they really go to, and look at what do you get from those events if you're there.
It's a big thing from a production point of view. I was speaking to somebody the other day that they committed to a 4-year deal as a production house to produce programs, not in motorsport as far as I'm aware, but and they're on their 4th year now, and they are losing money. They agreed a contract rate for the 4 years. First 2 years they made money. 3rd year they just about broke even. 4th year, because everything has gone through the sky, and their contract meant that they are actually losing money this year, which they will fulfill because that's how you have to do it. But there's suddenly going to be a big jump when everybody has this catching up business. I mentioned earlier on that presenters' fees will be going down. TNT have taken over BT, Eurosport, Discovery. It's all going to be under the one, and you can be fairly sure. I mean, to give you some idea, I don't know whether I've mentioned this on air before, but seeing as
you're going to tell us what you got paid?
Well, I won't tell you how much I got paid, but I will give you some percentages of it. Sky Sports paid twice as much as BT Sports. BT Sports pays twice as much as Eurosport. Now, you can make, if it's 50p, you can work out the percentages. But Sky Sports originally paid double what BT paid. BT paid double what Eurosport pays. Now, I know that because I was paid by all of them at some stage or another. So it's a situation. It's a declining market for presenters. There's a lot of young presenters coming in, like yourself, Harry, that really they've not been bred on the ludicrous amounts of money people were paid years ago. Now, Gary Lineker, is he worth 1.35 million to give us his left-wing views? At the end of the day, that's what the BBC pay him. 1.35 million. Blimey, that's a fair contract.
He's doing all right. I won't be able to buy a house anytime
and his
soon.
Crisps.
Huh?
And don't forget his crisps.
And that's a lovely, yes.
3 packets of crisps.
Don't mention the name; they're not paying us, so we won't give them a mention. Well, it's a really interesting detail to look into for us. I hope it's been interesting for you, just to give you a little behind the scenes of how it kind of works, sort of on a broadcast and a journalist side of things. These things don't happen overnight. There's a lot of things to weave their way into making what a production and a sport actually looks like on the TV and online when you read it. But we'll park that there for the moment, I think, and we'll go back to some actual MotoGP bike stuff, because we back on track this weekend, Pete. The final official pre-season test coming up this weekend.
That's right. Yes, Harry, we've waited a while, haven't we? Another few weeks. It's been a long winter in general, but it's been quite a break between the two tests this year. So yeah, we had Sepang 3 days early last month, and now this is the last 2-day test before the opening round. And of course, giving it extra importance is the test is at the same track, Portimao, as the opening round. So yeah, all eyes on the guys that need to improve, that struggled at Sepang. And I guess if you're Ducati, you're just hoping for the same again, please, having pretty much dominated at Sepang. You were talking actually about the VR46 launch. There was a media Zoom video call with the riders, as part of that. And Luca Marini was saying, look, Luca Marini, of course, was fastest in the 2 winter tests so far, Valencia, November, and Sepang. He was saying that, after Sepang, if they'd have raced there and then, the top 5 probably would have been Ducati. So it wasn't just us guys looking at the timesheets that thought that. He thought that as well. And he did actually name them. He said, himself, Jorge Martin, Pecco, Enea, and Bez, Marco Bezzecchi's teammate. He said that those 5 all had about the same pace and were the guys to beat at Sepang. It wasn't completely obvious, of course, because of the rain upsets. There was not that many race simulations, but that's what he as a rider thought as well. So it really does look like Ducati are the guys to beat. And Marini did say, he said, look, this time last year, I don't think the Ducati was the best bike. He meant the new Ducati, so the 22 last year. As we know, they had some problems. He said this year, the Ducati is the best bike already. And that's what's going to worry other people, isn't it, going into it? Keith made an interesting point, I hate to say this, but he did, a few podcasts ago, about Portimao being a unique track. I think he used the word motocross track, Keith. And I thought, right, well, I'm going to look at this. And I thought it'd be interesting to know what were the nearest results to Portimao? Which other track gave similar results? And do you know what? It was the Sachsenring. So there you go. If you want to look at, so just to recap, it was Quartararo won at Portimao from Zarco, and it was Aleix third after Miller took out Mir, you might remember. And what happened at Sachsenring? Quartararo won, exactly the same. From Zarco, exactly the same. And it was Miller in third and Aleix in fourth. So again, very similar results. So it does just show. I mean, if you've got results that kind of align with the Sachsenring, which is the most unique circuit on the calendar, isn't it? Tight, twisty, small. It does just show that it is a real sort of. It's one of those tracks with Phillip Island, maybe Kota, that sort of. There's something different about it, and it means that what we see at Portimao, it might not be what we see for the rest of the season. And you might contrast that with Sepang. What were the results last year? Pecco won. He ended up being world champion. Bassini was second. He was third in the championship. Quartararo was third in the race and second in the championship. So the top three guys in the championship were the top three guys at Sepang. So it just shows the contrast between the two testing tracks. And let's see what happens this weekend.
Well, let's see what happens this weekend, but it's quite deep as well, isn't it? I mean, thank God we'll be talking about motorbikes from now on in, so I haven't got room to rant about whatever it might be. But the point being this weekend as well is that some of them are going to be on these new magnetic Morelli ECUs and stuff as well that there's a bit of a shortage of because they haven't got the chips that they need to make it work for everybody out there. But I mean, it's kind of transpired in the last week or so since we talked about this new magnetic Morelli thing. I mean, Pete reported on it. And has sort of upgraded that report a bit, so you better look out for that. I see David Emmett was giving you a bit of blowing a bit of smoke your way, Peter. But effectively, these things have got so much more capacity to take information, and they're hooked in as well with more ports on the things as well, so you can plug more stuff into them. And one of your subjects from 2 years ago, I think, Pete, was the crash, not our podcast technology, but the crash technology that they're trying to integrate into Grand Prix bikes. And there's a whole sector that's available through the ECU as far as that's concerned as well. So Corrado, who's working on this, the guy that's behind all the technical stuff at the moment, has really sort of let the cat out of the bag a bit here, that this new ECU is actually a little bit more to it than what he's been sort of alluding to over the last few months. I mean, there is a lot more to it in actual fact. And I can imagine there being a bit of a clamour for the latest ECUs because the capacity of what you can download out of it and the like, and the speed at which you can download it as well, which is important. I mean, this will favour the factory teams more than the independent teams because when you're going to be downloading a load, you need someone to disseminate all of that. You need the staff, and the factory teams obviously have that back at base and at trackside, whereas the independent teams are going to be bloody up to their necks in it anyway. Add together the fact that we're 21 Grand Prix this year as well, plus sprint races. I just can't see how these people are going to get all the work done. I mean, the tech side in the garage, their brains are going to be on absolute overload. We are going to get halfway through this season, and people are going to be probably in some kind of trouble, I think, with their staff. I could predict that. It's the workload this year, 2023, has ramped up 100%.
Interesting you mentioned about the difference between the satellite and the factory teams. The question I asked Marini at the launch was, do you think, actually what we've spoken about on the podcast, should there be some sort of concessions for the satellite teams to just help them bridge that gap? And he totally disagreed. He said, no. You see, his point of view, Marini's very interesting. He can sort of look at something from different angles, not just from the rider's point of view. And that's why, I hope he does do well from that point of view of the sport, because he is very good at giving opinions, and he takes you can tell he's his brother's brother, you might say. And he gets that, he needs to get something across and make the sport interesting to people. And he was saying, look, the factories pay a lot of money. They need to win. His fear was that we've lost Suzuki. We don't want to lose any others. And so, even though he rides for a satellite team, and obviously he wants to do it the best that he can, the reality from the business side is the factory teams need to be winning the championship. They need to be doing well to keep the manufacturers involved, to keep them pumping the money in, as we were just talking about with, the sport needing money. As he said, this all plays into things. And so, yeah, quite interesting, because I expected that, from a pure rider's point of view, say, oh, yeah, definitely, we need to have, my suggestion was maybe a bit more fuel or one extra new tyre, over a weekend, just something like that, just to help perhaps even the gap between all of the human resources, as Keith says, that factory teams have compared with the much smaller satellite teams that have to go through data and things with a small group of people. But no, he said, look, I understand it. I don't want any change in the regulations. And you as a rider, your goal is to get to a factory team. That's your dream. He said, if you get there and then you find out that the satellite bike is quicker, you're not going to be very happy. So and just to finish that, his goal is definitely to get into a factory team for 24. Now, will that be possible? Who knows? And Bezzecchi said the same thing. So, they made it clear. Their goals are to win a race this year, both of them, and hopefully get into a factory team as soon as possible.
We've mentioned it on this pod before that quite often, as a previous factory rider, sometimes you jump on the factory bike and it is nowhere near as good as you thought it should be. I mean, like sometimes the one that's had all the data, and we've seen that, Grassini and the like, the fact is the bike that's already had a year's worth of data and has all that, what's the word I'm looking for? That default that you can always come back to. Whereas the factory bike has got all the new bits on it. You haven't yet worked through all of those bits of data yet to get it to its best.
That is exactly what Morini said, because he was also asked, what's the chances of you doing what Bastianini did last year and winning the first race on the year-old bike? And he said, the trouble is this year, the 2-day test. The 2-day test at Portimao is going to give the factories, exactly as Keith's been saying, who will otherwise struggle. Morini said, look, my bike, if you take it out the crate, it's ready to win. In machinery terms, that's it, go. But by having this 2-day test, the factories are going to have all that time to get their new parts that they might have trouble with at other racetracks when they turn up. They'll have more time to get them ready. So he thinks it'll be a tougher job at the first race. But then after that, he's going to have to sort of strike early in the first third of the season again for the reasons that Keith says. While the factories are still trying to get the setup right, they might be a bit slow to get everything in line. That's when the guys on the year-old bikes, and the year-old bikes are, there's some Aprilias, aren't there, at RNF, and there's the Ducatis. They're the only ones that are actually last year's bikes, where they can just take the bike out the crate and just go for it. And that's where they might benefit. But then it's going to get harder. As the season goes on, the factory guys will learn what they've got, understand it better, be up to speed sooner.
Also, probably a point worth making, Pete, is that this weekend, of course, it's the cut-off then. Once we get to Portimao proper, it's the cut-off from the changes you can make to the machinery. It's homologated, and that's the rest of the year. So any big changes that there are, I mean, I'm thinking of Yamaha at the moment, if they've got anything in the pipe at all that they can chuck at it when they get to Portimao, it's going to be their last opportunity. And after that, it's a sealed motor for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's exactly the engine is the big one, isn't it? As you say, this is it. Those that aren't sure what they're going to use, they're going to hope to be clear by Sunday night in Portimao, because that would be a nightmare, wouldn't it? To go into a new season, not quite sure if you pick the right engine, because as you say, Keith, they're going to have to. Once they leave pit lane with that engine, isn't it? No going back until December.
Well, just a couple more weeks until we have all the answers, really, and that first race is done. Now, you mentioned VR46, the riders there. We've had a lot of questions come in, and this one is on the VR46 riders, and a bit about Remy Gardner as well, I think, from Mike. Let's have a listen.
Hello, gentlemen. Mike Vincent here from Sydney, Australia. Long-time listener. I have 2 questions today. One is, how do you see VR46 playing out in terms of bike manufacturer, staying with Ducati or going over to Yamaha? And secondly, with Remy Gardner, do you see a future with Remy Gardner going to Yamaha MotoGP if successful in World Superbike? Thank you.
Well, a couple of tough questions there. Let's start off with Remy, shall we? I rate Remy very highly. I like the kid. I think he's a good rider. I think that it hasn't really worked out for him in MotoGP, but that wasn't to be surprised. We weren't to be surprised with that as the team really struggled to get to grips with the new bikes and the like. But I hope Remy nails it in World Superbike. Dad Wayne always used to tell me that Remy on a Superbike was a bit special. As soon as he got some horsepower under him without a lot of electronic interference, he was quite a kid with his right hand. So I hope Remy is successful. Whether there will be a room back for him, do you know what? I doubt it. There's such a logjam of great young kids coming through that are in the GP environment at the moment. It's going to be a real struggle for him to come back, even if he won the World Championship. Look at Toprak. He was the guy that Toprak Razgatlioglu was considered to be the man to come through to MotoGP. Right now, with the way things are going in World Superbike, you will think to yourself, I wonder if he will find his way to MotoGP. If it carries on going the way it is, Toprak might not be the man. They'll be wanting that old boy Alvaro back soon if he carries on going the way he is. Ducati and VR46. well, Valentino knows his stuff at the end of the day. Yamaha are struggling. They're going to have to come up with something a little bit special in the way of promises, I would say, to get them to switch across. It may be more about what Ducati are prepared to do for VR46 moving forward that will sway them, I would think. I think it will be more of a behind-the-scenes political situation. Who's getting the top-line bikes? If Ducati see the VR46 Empire as being the best option for their best bikes, then why would you change? At the moment, Ducati is the bike, and Yamaha most certainly isn't. You know, we might say something different after Portimao if Quartararo can put something together again at a track that we know the Yamaha works really well at. But there's a long bloody season this year, that is for sure. I think VR46 are in the right place at the moment. Whether they would change, I think, will be more down to Ducati.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, what would you do if you're VR46? It's always interesting seeing Rossi in these team pictures as well, in plain clothing, isn't he? You know, he never puts on the Ducati gear. You know, when he rides on the track with the guys, he's always on an R1. You know, those links between Rossi and Yamaha, they just go so far back, don't they? And it was the FIM president, wasn't it, who sort of released this rumor. I think it was over the winter, wasn't it, about VR46 moving to Ducati. Now, of course, it's been denied by VR46, who have a contract for next year with Ducati. That's the final year. But, you know, it's kind of one of those things, well, there's no smoke without fire. That's sort of what you think, isn't it? And Lynn Jarvis isn't denying it completely. I mean, you know, he's playing it very cool as ever, but he's certainly not ruling it out, let's say. It's going to come down to, as Keith says, the competitive machinery. You know, will they be offered full factory bikes to tempt them over? This is where the door is slightly ajar in that they're on year-old Ducatis now, aren't they? They've just slipped a little bit further from the front of the Ducati queue, haven't they, this year? Last year, Marini had the latest bike. Of course, you might say it didn't do him great favours at the start of the year for the reasons that Keith mentioned before about problems with new bikes, but still, he was up in the front end of the Ducati queue. Now they're on the year-old bikes, two of them, both riders. So you might say, well, there's a bit of a chance there for Yamaha to come in and say, look, we'll give you factory bikes. But then again, they never gave their satellite team two factory bikes before. So it's going to come down to how badly Yamaha wants to have a satellite team, how badly they want to have Valentino Rossi in there. And another one to throw in, which and it's come up again recently, but I heard it a few years back as well, is that, you know, what if they took over the factory team? What if they became the factory Yamaha team? You know, I heard that back in 2019. I first heard that.
I would say, Pete, that's hammer on nail of perfectly. I would say that would be the only way that Valentino would cross over. And you're right, the fact that he's never in Ducati colours and the like means that Ducati aren't doing enough for VR46 at the moment. It's a subtle way of making that clear. I can see him taking over the factory Yamaha team. And I can see that would be the only way that he'd be interested in it. But then only if the engineering department are giving them what they need. This year is a real make or break for Yamaha. You know, they've either got to have something that they're developing during the course of the year behind the scenes that no one will know about, so that when we get to 2024, there's something special ready and waiting and feasible. But if they keep going the way they're going, where they're just sort of fine-tuning what they've already got, I can't see that switch being made at the moment. Be interesting. I mean, that's the 2024 conversation. I can't believe we're talking about 2024 already.
We say that every year. We start the year talking about the next year.
Yeah.
And Remy, sorry, the second part of Mike's question. So Remy, yes, I mean, it's a bit like Iker Lecona, isn't it? It's a bit of a similar situation. I know, Harry. Sorry to open that wound again, but I mean, the easiest way to come back is a bit like if you're a Moto2 rider and you want to get into MotoGP as well, which obviously Remy did, and that was to win the championship. You know, he won the World Championship Moto2 and he got a MotoGP seat. I think if you're Iker Lecona or you're Remy Gardner, one of these young guys that has certainly age on their side in terms of coming back, you've got to win the World Superbike title. I think if you do that, and sometimes it's even in the contracts, you know, they'll have a contract that says if I win the championship, you know, you give me a ride in your satellite team. Obviously, the problem for Yamaha is they don't have a satellite team at the moment. But from what they're saying, they're very keen on getting one in the near future, whether that's 24 or 25. There will be some more Yamahas on the grid, which will obviously be a big boost to Remy and anyone else who is already on a Yamaha.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike, for those excellent questions. We've got another Mike here as well.
Hey guys, I appreciate your podcast very much. I look forward to it every week. A question about Marc Marquez. A lot of discussion about will he stay with Honda? Will he go to Ducati? I really don't see an opening at Ducati. Certainly not in 2024. Maybe not in 2025. I don't see him taking less than a factory seat, in my opinion. Anyway, what I'm wondering about, I haven't heard anyone talk about Marquez moving to Aprilia, factory Aprilia. Alicia Spargaro, I know, doesn't want to race too much longer. Will he race out his contract? I don't know. Maybe that seat could be available in next year. What do you guys think about that? That seems to have some strong potential in my mind, but no one's talking about it. Maybe you guys can. Thanks.
What do we think?
I think your opinion's good. I think you're bang on at the moment with that. I mean, it's. I think you pretty much answered the question. I mean, yeah, Aprilia would be a steal if he feels that Honda are not able to develop a motorbike that's going to get him another world title. He's 30 years old now. It's amazing how it creeps up on you. I look in the mirror in the mornings and I think, good God, who's that geezer? I'm sure Mark doesn't think that just yet, but he's 30 years old and all that injury. And he didn't go through all that pain and that corrective surgery to not win another world title. So at the end of the day, he will want a competitive machine. If the Honda isn't the bike, God, could Honda afford another bad year?
No. That's my answer.
I mean, the first thing I'd like to say for that question is, and isn't this fantastic, that we're even considering Marc Marquez and Aprilia. If we went back a couple of years in MotoGP, and Aprilia were back of the grid, you'd never imagine
Laughed you out the room.
Credit where it's due. They have got that bike to the front of the field, and now in a position where it's up there as the challenger to a Ducati. If you can't get a Ducati, you look for an Aprilia at the moment, and we have to see what happens at this test.
Well,
but yeah, the evidence from Sepang is that they're going to build on last year. The one question Michael
the
will
problem
say
you've
is,
got,
sorry, Keith, it's just the concessions thing, isn't it? That's the one thing it's been a great start at Sepang. But and we've mentioned this before. Normally, the concessions do sort of just trim the results off a little bit. So let's see how this year goes for them.
The problem you've got when you take on someone like Marc Marquez is one that we've talked about so many times, and the reason why Ducati have never been interested in taking him on, because if he wins, it's Marc Marquez. If he loses, it's the manufacturer. Now, will his status have slipped to a point where Aprilia can take that risk? That's the question. If Marc Marquez's dominance has slipped down the order and Aprilia give him a bike that he can become winning again, that will be full points to Aprilia, not to Marc Marquez. So it's kind of a question of where he is in the pecking order at the point of those contracts coming up, almost. Ducati have pretty much ruled him out because of the reasons I've said. KTM, if you remember, there was a big rumour about KTM. And at the time, that Red Bull money, there was loads of money. They could have fired 40 million quid at Marc Marquez and stolen him across at some stage a while ago. But of course, if that bike hadn't won, it would have been down to the bike, not Marc Marquez. If it did win, it would have been Marc Marquez winning on a KTM, not because of the KTM. So, I mean, it's a real poison chalice when you've got someone as great as Marc Marquez in the marketplace, and it's just a question of where that market is at the time those contracts come up. Good question, though.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Actually, a bit of it doesn't really answer the question, but you reminded me of something there, Keith. I spoke to Marc Marquez's Öhlins technician and Michelin tyre technician at Sepang. Now, I'll keep it brief so I don't bore you all, but the thing that really interested me about what they said was that they both exactly the same thing, and that was that Marc's feedback is fantastic. When he rides a bike, he comes back in pretty quickly. He tells you exactly what the bike is doing, and it matches exactly with what they then see on the telemetry. And both of them said this separately without any prompting or anything like that. And I thought that was interesting, just that that was the thing that they raised as being surprising about Marc, because sometimes with these super talented riders, these multiple champions, they're so naturally talented that it seems that one of the things you hear is that they just do things on instinct. And they're not too good at developing bikes because they just solve it. They just ride around it with their own natural talent. But it seems like, in Marc's case, he is spot on with the feedback that he gives. Both of them said that, and it exactly matches what they see on the data. One other thing is that his Öhlins guy said, because we're always seeing Marc hard on the brakes, aren't we? And doing those, bike getting out of control and those kind of things. He said, look, that is just Marc pushing the bike to the limit. Marc's setup on the bike is actually nothing unusual. He runs a normal range of suspension, let's say. It's just the way he pushes. So, just a bit of an insight into Mark's working ways, shall we say, and perhaps what Honda have missed while he's been injured. Missing that feedback.
Well, thank you, Mike, for the question. God, I looked down for 1 minute and Keith's disappeared. And then he's back.
Cup of tea time.
Right, well, yeah, nearly time for a cup of tea and some lunch. But we've got a couple more questions to do, and I'm wary because we didn't get the voice notes done last time, so I want to get them all done. Stephen's up next. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Harry, Pete and Keith. It's Steve from Victoria, Australia. Thanks for the awesome podcast, guys. It's a must watch and listen for me every week. As a long-time MotoGP fan, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the future of the sport. Where do you think it will be in 5 to 10 years' time? Do you guys think it will go fully electric in that period? I hope there'll always be a place for the internal combustion engine. And is the current rate of spending sustainable in MotoGP long-term? Thanks for your insights, guys. I will listen to the podcast. Thank you.
Another great question. Yes, of course, MotoGP will. I think MotoGP's got headroom. We've seen what's happened. Again, I'm sorry to keep mentioning Formula One. It's my bearded friend that's obviously big in Formula One. But the point being is that there was headroom in Formula One, massive amount of headroom in Formula One. Digital media wasn't something that they embraced. And I think with MotoGP, Dorna have been quite wide thinking with this. They've enhanced the digital media platforms that are out there. I think they need to get away from the geo fencing that they do and the kind of petty stuff that they do that blocks people from seeing things in different marketplaces and stuff like that. I think that there are certain areas that Dorna really must address as we move forward. The funding is probably the biggest problem that you've got with any kind of sport of this kind, and they've taken I don't think they took a massive hit, but they certainly didn't make much profit during the 3 years of the pandemic. I think that's hit them quite hard. At the end of the day, they have quite big backers behind them that they've got to show that it is a viable business moving forward. And they're kind of enhancing their product with this sprint race on a Saturday, looking to try and get bigger TV audiences into that and the like. Losing Valentino Rossi at this particular point, a global superstar, is a blow, whichever way you look at it. Valentino not being on track, he was 50% of the audience back in the day, the same as we had Barry Sheen, Mike Hailwood. If you go back even further, there are certain icons that worldwide they're recognised, and they're what you attach yourself towards. So I think that building the brand still further is a big job that Dorna have got, and that costs a lot of money. And the product itself, to me, seems really, really good. I don't know whether I'm bloody blinkered or what, but I mean, MotoGP for me, watching MotoGP, getting involved in MotoGP, it does it for me all the time. I get excited just thinking about it. And if that is the way that people feel and it has that momentum behind it, there's been the big argument about influencers and people on the grid and famous faces and things like that. There's 50% of people say, we don't want to see those kind of people that know nothing about the sport wandering around on the grid. Well, perhaps we don't, but there are a lot of people, millions of people who follow them who do. And there is a fairly large sheep-like mentality out there that influencers, breed. People feed off of what influencers do and the like. Are we moving in the right direction with the right associations, with the right people? That's something that somebody somewhere should be looking at within Dorna. Where will we be in 10 years' time? Hopefully not electric, and I think that we've pretty much proved that by going the sustainable fuel route at the moment. I don't want to go banging on about electric again because I've got a bad name for it already, but it's kind of like they're looking at the sustainable fuel side of things, which is good. I can't see us moving away from that direction at the moment. In fact, from a personal point of view, I could see the rest of the world coming towards us regarding that. It was only a few years ago the government was banging on that diesel was the best thing since sliced bread. Now it's like the Antichrist. It's kind of one of those things where things change, position changes regarding technology and the like. There was a shout for the fact that two-strokes were becoming more environmentally friendly just a little while ago, and we were looking at maybe two-strokes were coming back into the fray. Oh, that would make me feel ever so wonderful, but I can't see it. I mean, it was. When you listen to people, the youngsters again in Formula One, okay, I'll use them rather than the MotoGP. But when they talk about they stand at trackside and they're listening to a V10 or a V12 going by in a demo, and they all say, God, I wish it was like that again. Even the guys driving these hybrids that are in Formula One at the moment harp back, even the youngsters. I mean, this could be an old man's thing. Obviously, I'd be quite easily to be slated for that. But it's not just an old man's thing, it's a young man's thing as well. When they stand there and they listen to the mechanics of a V12 screaming its nuts off, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. The world needs a bit of that.
It's funny because I couldn't care less, which almost seems like sacrilege. So I tell you what, I do get the sound idea because I went to Ferrari do this event every year called the Finale Mondiali, and it's their big Ferrari celebration, whatever, and they whack out all the old F1 cars. Schumacher. We're going back to sort of 2004 era, and they sound amazing, but I'm happy to hear it once. When you hear it, it hurts the ears after a while. It just does. And it's like, all right, okay, I've heard it now. Put it back in.
It's a really interesting viewpoint because you are obviously decades younger than me.
I turned 26 this week. Can you believe it?
Yeah, 4 decades younger than me. But the point being is that, well, happy birthday. I'm glad you made it.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed.
I was always told that I wasn't going to make 26.
Well, it's not till Saturday, so anything could happen till then.
Yeah, well, you give me much lip, and I'll come down and insult you. But the point being is that your perspective is a really interesting one. I mean, I talk about sitting here with I've got young daughters, as you all know, and the fact is that their perspective is interesting for me. Where we are in the world is interesting for me, and it's interesting that question that's just been asked. Where will we be in 10 or 15 years' time, 5-10 years' time? I mean, it's a great question because if we knew we'd make a lot of money in the next 5 or 10 years' time, you can't know where technology is going to go. There is somebody beavering away in a white coat somewhere that's coming up with tomorrow's new ideas. And the likes of organisers and promoters and so on and so forth will jump on that, and governments, of course, because they always jump on it retrospectively. It's going to be really interesting. I'm for rocket power.
Ooh, that would be good. Pete, what do you reckon?
In terms of the future rules, as you say, the thing we know is the non-fossil fuel that you've been talking about. So that's it. We can tick that box. We know they're going to be running 100% on that from 2027 onwards. At the moment, everything else is up for grabs. Now, what I think will happen from 27, which is the end of the current contract with the manufacturers, so that's when you get any big changes. I don't actually think there will be that many big changes. I think, reduction in some of the ride height devices and whole shot devices, for the reasons that we've talked about before, the straight line speed, maybe more restrictions on the aerodynamics. I don't think they'll get rid of them completely. I think it'll be those kind of changes. Whether they'll change the engine size, I'm honestly not sure, but I'm sure it will be from 27. It will still be an internal combustion engine. It'll just be running the non-fossil fuel, and they'll have a choice of biofuel, or they can choose this e-fuel. Both are sort of, I think technically there's not that much difference between them, but they're two different ways of approaching the same problem. So they're keeping things open for the fuel manufacturers. And Repsol, if anyone's interested, if you like, in the team launch, they made a big thing about this move that's going to start from 24. They go to, I think, 40% next year. So they start that process. Keith was mentioning the ECU is going to have all these extra sort of data gathering capabilities to tune the engine to fix this with this new fuel. So they're going to start that process from next year. And that should help draw in also the big petroleum companies and oil manufacturers for renewable fuels in that sense. Now, in terms of the sport in general, I think, there's a bit of a lull, isn't there? Because obviously Rossi left, a lot of big names and big characters left. Lorenzo, Pedrosa, Cal, Dovi, if you like, as well. A lot of guys were very popular. And then we've got the young guys coming through when we've had Mark injured. But I think, we also was talking about Marini being very good at presenting himself and talking about the sport. There's other young guys as well who I think will grow into their position as they sort of advance to, mid to late 20s. Guys, I mean, Jack's always good in entertaining, isn't he? Let's hope he's unleashed a bit more at Red Bull than he was at Ducati. I think they kept him on a bit of a tighter leash than perhaps he had at Pramac, where he was given more freedom and was a very entertaining guy to talk to always. So let's hope that Jack sort of, gets the results and puts KTM up there as well, and that things are close. But I think, let's hope that Mark is the big name at the moment that's still in the sport. And we're talking about documentaries and things. Mark's got that all in, isn't he, on Amazon Prime, which is a fantastic watch for anyone. I only saw it recently and watched all of them almost in one go. And that's a great series. And
Peter. You're breaking up massively there. Missed all of that last bit. Your Wi-Fi's been a bit dodgy. Oh God.
All right, I'm on a cable actually, but yeah.
Oh dear, yeah. Stop talking, Pete.
Dump the visual for a minute. Well, let me come off the back of what Pete had to say there. Of course, that Dorna have been quite clever in the fact they've covered off the electric stream with Moto E. The World Cup of Moto E. So instead of something being developed independently somewhere else by someone else, some other promoters, some other series, Dorna have got that option that's coming on. At the moment, the batteries are too heavy, too weighty, don't last long enough, so they don't give us what we want as far as a Grand Prix is concerned. That's why it's called a World Cup. But the fact is the development is going on to the side, but it's under the wing of Dorna. So they've still got that option, which is quite clever. I think politically it's very, very clever. I mean, engineering-wise, it's clever. And with Ducati coming in this year to take over the Moto E single manufacturer tag, it's going to be pretty good.
It certainly will be. Well, look, we've rapidly come to the end there.
If you could hear me.
Oh, Pete, shut up, Pete. Just shut up, Pete. No. Can't you tell I'm rounding off?
That first MotoE test is going on as we speak. So it was a very timely of Keith to mention this. So I'll just tell you that, they set a new lap record, MotoE lap record on day 2. So it is quicker, but not by much.
Okay.
Oh, and it is the World Championship this year. I'll just say that. It's gone from a World Cup to a World Championship for this year. There you go.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
But it's not a Grand Prix, is it?
No. But they changed the name from, as you say, from World Cup. I think for this year, it gets to be a World Championship. So there we are. Not that you'll notice the difference on track.
Maybe we should talk about Moto E more this year. I know Keith would love that. Right, we've hit an hour. Pete's Wi-Fi's going here, there, and everywhere. So we're going to end the show. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. There are still some more. I've got them on the system. We'll just roll them over to next week. So Dean, Kieran, Paul, I see all your questions. They will be answered. Don't you worry. And if you want to get your question in as well, you can do so. The email is podcast@crash.net. Send us a 30-second voice note. Leave your name and where you're from, and you will be played out on the show. Equally, if you just want to send us a question in the written form, you can send it to that same email address, or just send it to our Crash MotoGP social media channels or on the YouTube comments. But that is it for today's show. Finally, next week we'll actually have some action to talk about after the final preseason test. So looking forward to that. But in the meantime, make sure you tune in across Crash.net for all the latest news and analysis across the week. And as I say, we'll be back with you next week. Questions, leave them in all the usual ways, and importantly, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, especially Apple and Spotify. We shall see you right back here next week. From myself, Harry Benjamin, from Pete McLaren, and from MotoGP reigning world champion Keith Ewan. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.